Congressman Mike Quigley represents Illinois' 5th District. He has been a big supporter of Ukraine. He co-chairs a Ukraine caucus in the Congress and joins us now to talk about that and tariffs and everything else. Mike, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Good to be back.
It's good to have you back. I've been reading recently that with all the immigration moves that are coming out of the Trump administration, that Ukrainians who sought refuge here to get away from the war are now very, very worried that their status is in jeopardy. Where does that stand right now?
You know, it's one of those things where it's an opaque administration. We'd like to find out what they're going to do next, but as you can see, they are as unpredictable as they can possibly be. Our Ukrainian friends aren't the only ones. There are others who have left war-torn areas like Afghanistan, and they have the same fears. So this is an administration that doesn't seem to have a heart, and if you're talking about coherent policy, I'm not sure they have the brain either.
Sure. Well, I know that a judge just ruled today that the father of 3 who was due to an administrative error was swept up in an immigration raid now has to be returned to his family. The judge ruled that he must be returned to his family, even though my understanding is lawyers for Trump said, you know what? We really can't. We can't go. We don't know exactly where he is. You know, we probably can't find him. But the judge said, you know what? You find him, you bring him home. And now I guess we wait and see whether or not the Trump administration drags its feet or actually agrees to do that.
Well, it's reminiscent of the first Trump administration when they were splitting families apart as they were being shipped out of the country. And some of those families were never able to find each other again, needle in the haystack. So, unfortunately, this is repeating itself unnecessarily.
I just was looking at that judge ruling, and not only did the judge rule that this guy has to be returned, but Kilmar Abrego Garcia has to be returned by April 7th at 11:59 p.m. Well, I guess we're not going to wait long to see whether or not it happens.
Yeah, I agree. Look, we're all kind of worried and anxious to see what happens when and if the Trump administration overtly rejects a judicial finding. The old Andrew Jackson threat, you've got your ruling, now enforce it. This goes way back to the Federalist Papers, where when they were advocating for the Constitution, they acknowledged the fact that courts don't have the independent ability to enforce their rulings. They have civil, they have criminal, but in the end, they're all enforced by the executive branch. Individuals who commit, violate these rulings, they can be held in contempt, but the President of the United States can bail them out of that. So I think the mere fact that we're talking about that and thinking about it tells us that we are already in a constitutional crisis. The courts, I think, for the most part, have done their part. I think for the most part they have stepped up. It's frustrating for us as members of Congress because I know some people aren't aware. We don't have the standing to sue. In other words, Leader Jeffries doesn't have standing to sue. Members of Congress don't to enforce some of these issues in actions. What we can do is sign on to amicus briefs to support them. We can coordinate and work with organizations that are part of these lawsuits. But at this point in time, all we can do is use our vote and our voice, try to get the president to do the right thing.
Yeah. And now let's segue over to tariffs. Today, the Wall Street Journal digital headline, 2,200-point drop in Dow ends brutal week for stocks. How much more pain before the winning starts, Mike? When does the winning start?
Well, what I try to do with a circumstance like this if I quote the New York Times or the Washington Post to some of my conservative friends in Congress, they're just going to shrug. But you're quoted one of the headlines, but here's some others from the op-ed from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal says the dumbest trade war in history. Another one, a $6 trillion Trump tax increase. The Cato Institute. These are all pretty conservative entities. Reciprocal tariffs are Trump's worst trade idea yet. They will create havoc. They will make everything cost more. But what I really like listeners to pick up on is this. When you combine it with a foreign policy that dictates isolationism and clings closer to people like Putin, right? There's no tariffs on Russia yet. There's no tariffs on North Korea yet. And you're telling the rest of the world, you're telling NATO that it's on its own, and you're tariffing your best friends. And even if they weren't your best friends, trade with Mexico and Canada is so tied into our economy that it's going to play havoc on both countries, all three countries. And the fact is, Europe is probably going to work together to put together retaliatory tariffs against us, which will hurt farmers, which will hurt almost every aspect of our economy. It's going to hurt us in Chicago because everything will cost more. It will cost more to build houses. It will cost more to buy fruits and vegetables. There will be some fruits and vegetables you won't be able to get. So, look, I don't know what the bottom of this is. The winning, let's just say you can make a case for this, that things will, more cars will be built here. It takes a long time to shift production,
yes,
to have it move someplace else. And in the meantime, the economy in the world moves very swiftly elsewhere. We are, 5% of the world's market in population. They're not going to wait around for us. They're going to be able to work without us. It's arrogant to think otherwise.
I saw a presentation by Tom Skilling and Don Wubbles on climate change Wednesday at the City Club of Chicago. And one of the fears that they addressed, because it isn't just climate change research that's being cut, it's all of science. And a lot of scientists at universities are finding their funding disappearing. They're very worried that by the time the Trump administration is over, we might be in such a deep hole that we're never really going to catch up with the rest of the world. Do you share that fear?
I do. And, I try to put this in a few headings. I try to tell people you're going to be less safe because what Trump administration is doing. Everything's going to cost more. You'll be less free. And everyone will be hurt by this. So, when you're talking about research that deals with things like healthcare, cancer research, that's not going to affect somebody else. That's going to affect you or someone you know. Obviously, you're talking about climate change. One of the concerns I have is there is so much going on. Mm-hmm. Issues like climate change aren't on the front page. I think it's probably the issue that our grandchildren would be most angry with us about. So, look, you're worried about health care, cuts to VA and health care for veterans, Medicaid, U.S. EPA, not just the research part of this, but keeping our air clean, avoiding the precursors to ozone. Obviously, the research that you're talking about, but the double whammy of USAID, CDC, and Health and Human Services cuts, we're going to find out how small the world is in a hurry because when pandemics start someplace else, because we're not helping with vaccinations, they don't stay there. What happens over there comes over here, and it's going to bite us too.
Yeah. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I also want to say I was at a concert at the Old Town School of Folk Music last night, And Rufus Wainwright asked the crowd, if Trump invades Canada, would the people in the crowd go to Canada and help them fight? And I've got to say, it was a roaring applause, yes. So please, let's not have it come to that.
Fair enough. I like Canadian hockey players, too.
Yeah. Mike Quigley represents Illinois' 5th District with his elbows out.